This is a BreakTime episode of Away, a podcast for anyone exploring change through sobriety. I'm your host, Steph Roberts.
I would like to invite up to the podium someone very special to me.
Aww.
It's a shock he remembered my name. He calls me by his ex-wife's name all the time. So whenever you hear Lori, he means me. No, it's fine. He had a stroke, poor little fella. It's called regression. Although, as you all know, I've referred to him as my giant Japanese toddler for a long time. So it's unsurprising. My name is Steph, and I am an alcoholic. He told everybody else I was speaking, and he didn't tell me till 2 minutes ago. But I'm not someone who ever I have a soaking wet bathing suit on, so I'm like a little bit of a mess. I mean, I'm 41. Nobody wants to see that. Okay, so why do I qualify to talk to any of you? First, I'm pretty excited to be in this room tonight, especially because so many of you are counting days and in your first year and new, and that is that's meaningful. And I think a message I try to get across a lot when I speak now is that AA is for everyone and has room for everyone. No matter what you believe, no matter where you come from, no matter who your parents were, no matter what kind of school you went to, you have a place here. And I say that loudly and clearly because I am an atheist. I came from the city where that was not an issue. And when I first moved out here, it seemed to present a problem for some people in the rooms here. I'm a tough girl. We'll use the nice terminology. And so I don't put up with that. I don't like being challenged on that. To say that I can't get sober without capital G God. I'm here with 8 years, more than 8 years, 8.5. My life is happier, better, serener, calmer, freer. It's 180 degrees from what it was 8.5 years ago. And I didn't do that with capital G God. Would I take that away from anyone else? Absolutely not. If what you come in here with is a God-sized hole, and this program helps you to find God to fill it, no better place will lead you to that. But there is no one right answer. There is no one right higher power. There is no one spiritual path to follow. And if anyone tells you that, just keep what I'm saying now in your mind. I don't want you to run away. I want you to stay. There's a place for you no matter what. On that note, I'll also mention that in sobriety, I was diagnosed with some depression and some anxiety. A huge part of my drinking was to self-medicate anxiety. Going out in public was a standalone, very difficult thing for me to do. I drank to ease that. I drank to get out of the house. I found Lexapro and then I found Zoloft only because I lifted the fog of drinking. I would never have been properly diagnosed, and now I get to live this life where I'm like, every day, I'm like, where are my meds? I'm very excited to take them because then I get to go out into the world as like a normal person. My desire to drink is zero. Not everyone can say that, and a lot of people do struggle. I am sickened by the thought of ever even feeling drunk again, let alone hungover. But let me get to the beginning of my story to give you an idea of why the thought of feeling that way ever again is so vile to me. I grew up in New York City on the Upper East Side. I was adopted. I think that's probably more of an important part of my story than I yet understand as I learn more about attachment issues and feeling different from and less than. But I was adopted by like super waspy, wealthy, Upper East Side parents, lovely people to whom I felt no attachment from a very young age. They're good people, they're kind people, not very parental people, but doing the best they could with what they had. But there was no attachment, there was no connection. And I felt very different from everyone around me. I was brought into this super upper class, high life kind of world, and it's weird because I wasn't born into that, and so much of that nature nurture argument comes up for me because I really didn't feel I felt fit in, and not from like 10, 11, 12, from like 3, 4, 5. Like I remember not feeling comfortable at 5 years old. We would go on these beach walks in Southampton with all these little blonde kids, and they were named, like, this is the 80s, they're Bo and Blair, and everything's blonde, downy blonde and skinny. And we would have to hold onto a rope and walk out into the ocean together, and I couldn't do it. Like, I couldn't join them. Every part of me felt like I wasn't a part of, I couldn't be with them, and I would rather sit in the kitchen with the leader of this group's mother and eat cookies with her in the kitchen. Which was much better, because my own mother was very food restrictive, sort of like, no sugar, no nothing like your friends have. You have to be skinny. So I did a lot of cookies with her mother in the kitchen, and then that sort of gave way to my first addiction, which really was food. All of this, so I start binge eating, I start stealing money, that sort of thing. You hear it in a lot of women's stories in the rooms. I'm sneaking food, I'm getting fatter, now I don't fit in even more. I feel different from in an even greater way. I'm literally setting myself apart from everybody else. And there's tons of stuff in the beginning years that played a part in my alcoholism. I do believe I was born different. I do believe there's something in me that's different from the normal person, because a lot of people I went to school with had the exact same experience as me. A lot of them didn't feel comfortable or like they fit in either, and they're not here now. Nor will they ever be, nor do they need to be. This all built and built and built these feelings of misery and not fitting in and social anxiety. And by 13 years old, I was ready to rumble. Like I had anger in me coming out of every part of my body. I talked to my parents. I'm still ashamed to this day of the way I treated them and spoke to them. I was stealing from them. I fell in with a group of kids not from my school, and I spent a huge amount of time hanging out on 135th Street and Lenox Avenue in the early 90s in New York City, where I would brown bag my 40, and I'd have my spliff, I'd pour a little out for my homies. I walked like an OG, like crushed bamboo earrings, the whole thing. I mean, I don't look the part, right? But it was where I felt better, and the people there who I was hanging out with became my good friends. They were also the ones who introduced me to Oldie and Cisco. And I don't remember, there was always drinking in my house, so I don't remember my first drink, but I remember my first shit-faced. And it was a game changer. It was like, oh, I can do this. Like, I can do life. I have found the way to do this, to be social. So about a year into my brown bagging the 40s uptown, I started to slither my way sort of back into my high school friend crowd. And I became, as you hear many people say here, a chameleon. And I was able to fit in to the sort of richy bitchy world, and I was able to fit into the uptown world. And I could literally change my clothes and my personality wherever I was going. As long as I was drinking, I could be whoever I thought you wanted me to be, whoever I thought I needed to be accepted by you. And I did it, and I did it well. And I became the bad girl at high school, which is, it's not terrible because you're not unpopular. You're just sort of like feared a little bit, and everybody kind of wants to be your friend. So I set myself apart. I set myself up with a kind of bad girl attitude. I was tough. I was the bully who bullied only the bullies, right? I never liked seeing the weak guy get hurt. So I would always stand up for the weak guy, but I would get aggressive with the bully. Like I was not, who I am now. I still might get a little bit aggressive with the bully. But yeah, so, I had carved out a place for myself. So I kind of felt like, or I could lie to myself and feel like I fit in a way, like I fit in everywhere. And alcohol was what allowed that for me, because when I took that out of the picture later, the social anxiety was so intense, it causes me nausea, it causes irritability, like it causes all these incredible physical symptoms for me that I would not have been able to live without alcohol and no proper diagnosis and medication. So in many ways, in my early years of drinking, alcohol saved my life. It allowed me to keep living. I feel like I would have been a different kind of statistic had I not found it. So high school's weekend drinking, blah, blah, blah. I'm hanging out with a lot of older people, so to compare my drinking to theirs is sort of nonsensical, because I'm drinking with men. I'm drinking with, guys who are 19, 20 years old. I'm 14, 15, 16. So am I drinking like my high school friends? No, but I'm not really drinking that much with them. Start with them, end with the real drinkers. Still only weekends. Early in college, my father's diagnosed with cancer. I'm weekend warrior. When the diagnosis happens, it's like every night warrior. Not daily drinking, but I'm out most nights. I'm not going to morning classes. If I'm designing a schedule to not have morning classes. And if I'm have them, I'm not really showing up for them. I was lucky to have a good enough education that the school I chose wasn't that great, and I didn't have to do a lot of work to skate by, but like that was an actual choice. Like I was like, I'm gonna go somewhere easy where I don't have to do anything. Thanks, Mom, for the money. Like it was just no gratitude for what I was getting. Cocaine came into the picture in college, which made the binging a lot easier. So, every night fueled with cocaine could be an all-nighter, and it mostly was. Meth was kind of new to the scene then, and you could get it like cocaine, and you would snort it like cocaine. So when cocaine wasn't readily available, there was always what we then called glass on campus. Very grateful that did not take hold. The downs were too low for me, even then. And drinking was really my thing. I just needed something to fuel the booze. Like to this day, I used cocaine so I could drink the way I wanted to drink, which was all day, every day, all the time. End of college, my father dies right as I'm about to graduate. People say there's a turning point in their stories. I was a pretty heavy drinker, but I would say I used it as an excuse. I was like, well, now I got a reason to drink the way I'm drinking. Now I can do it unashamedly, right? I can just be out there with my drinking, and I did. And I got a job right out of college, and daily drinking started almost immediately. My boss is a currently active alcoholic. She is still drinking. She and we bonded very quickly, oddly. We'd have liquid lunches together. I'd drink the rest of the day at work. I'd come back in with Mountain Dew and vodka snuck in. This was in retail sales, so that was fun. And then I'd drink all night and do it all again. And the hangovers were bad. Life was bad. I was engaged in other very shameful sorts of behaviors that women especially tend to feel really badly about after. Life was not getting better in any way. And I was getting angrier and angrier and angrier. So I thought a boyfriend would fix it. I wasn't really embracing my feminist traits then. I thought a boyfriend would fix it. I took one hostage. He was from Scotland. I said, honey, let's move to Scotland. Because I thought if I moved to a place where they didn't drink, I'd be fine. It turns out they drink, it's a little different. The scheduling there is a little different. They close a little earlier, but it turns out they do drink there, and plenty. So I would drink every night. My drinking changed because of the scheduling. I got a job. I drank every night 2 or 3 bottles of wine until I passed out. The poor guy did not have a girlfriend there. I dragged him back to his miserable, horrible, low-life family. And then I decided I wasn't happy there, so I basically ghosted him. I was just like, later. And I left him in Scotland with a family who hated him. And I came back. And I thought coming back to New York would fix everything. I'm this fresh start. First night out, probably 8 hours straight of drinking, more of those shameful behaviors. I use quotes because we shouldn't necessarily be ashamed, but we are. Within a month of being home, I took myself to my first meeting of AA at the 79th Street Workshop in New York City, which to this day is probably my favorite meeting in all the world. They have meetings from 6 a.m. through 10 p.m. at night. It's a wonderful melting pot of different people. Everything is represented there. I raised my hand. I said I was an alcoholic for the first time. I got a sponsor. I stayed around for 4 years. I did not read the book. I did not do the steps. I thought that I had to lose or change my entire personality in order to stay sober. So I went from the bleeding heart liberal that I am to a full-on conservative just by saying it. Like, none of it was in me. It was like I just changed. I was like, well, I got to do 180. No one had told me that you don't actually have to give up who you are to be sober. You just have to give up alcohol and maybe some crummy ways of thinking. You know, like that's what you're changing. You're not changing you, but I didn't know that. So I stayed sober on this 180 version of me for 4 years. But did I stay sober? Not really. I put down booze and I put down cocaine, and I'm sure it saved my life. Because going at the rate I was going, if alcohol hadn't taken me, something else was gonna. There were a lot of bad situations happening in among those all-nighters. Any one of them could have taken my life. So I do think it saved my life. But I put down the booze and I picked up food. I was already on the heavy side. I'd been a dieter on and off my whole life, starving myself, eating. I put on 60 pounds. By the end of those 4 years, I was 260 pounds, a size 22, miserable. My sponsor went out, so I went out. That was my excuse. Well, she did it, why can't I? I went out, and I went out pretty hard, pretty fast. I spent about a week at home. Thing is, I didn't put down the food too, so I had all of it. I was smoking and eating and drinking, get fatter. Like, it was like garbage head, the cocaine, like everything was, how can I get out of this misery? Every part of me aches, right? Like the self-loathing is, the script in my head was so bad that like I thought that cars on the street were resentful of not being able to hit me. That is literally a thought I would have. That like this car is resentful that the stop sign is making him stop, that he would rather keep going and hit me. Like that, when I think about that girl now, like I shake with tears for her. Because like, wow, to live with that. How can you not drink when that's the script? When there's been no rewriting? When you've done nothing to rewrite, no cognitive behavioral therapy to rewire that. So it was easy to go out and it was easy to drink and it was easy to party. It was not easy to live with myself. And the alcohol stopped working. Like it was no longer just erasing the anxiety and shame. It was creating more. So where once it had worked, now the amount I had to drink to get to that place where these thoughts and feelings weren't there was so immense that, you know, a binge became 72 hours, like just to try and get out of it, And then you'd wake up and, I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember very clearly that the anxiety, even if you're not someone with an anxiety disorder, the anxiety that comes along with a hangover, if you add Coke, it's even worse, is so, like you're physically shaking. The thought of leaving the house is nearly impossible, if possible at all. I had no mirrors in my house anymore because I couldn't look at myself. I was a binge drinker, so there were days when I wasn't binging, but they were punishment days. You know, they were days of hangovers so bad, and I describe them a lot because this is often what keeps me sober is remembering those hangovers. I never want to feel that way again. And there's that like trite thing where people are like, I'd send myself to the ER if I felt that way now. No, I really would. Like, I think I was poisoned, you know? My pores were the size of my nostrils. Hot, sweat, but still dry somehow. Like just, and there's dry, everything was so bad. And like, it's visceral to me now. Just, I cannot, and the fatigue, the thought of ever feeling that way, now that I'm also in a place where I know I deserve not to feel that way, is just impossible to me. Like, I cannot do that again. I cannot go through the world like that ever again. And I don't want to. I'm terrified at the prospect of that. Which is a great place to be. Let me tell you, it makes staying sober really easy when you're just like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. So after 3.5 years out, my, lots of shameful behavior, and my last night drinking was not spectacular in any real way. It was like any other. I was going out on a date with a guy from online, a second date, and then my friend Megan came and we turned into an all-nighter. He was kind of a loser. I had started my weight loss process then. I was doing everything I could not to get sober. So I was like, well, if I lose weight, I'll like myself. And if I quit smoking, I'll like myself. So before I actually got sober, I had embarked on the great weight journey. I'd lost like 100 pounds. It does not make it easier actually to come in again, because you're like, now I'm skinny. I want to I want to party skinny. So it was actually sort of a deterrent for a while. I think I almost stayed out longer. Like, fix this problem first. The rest will come. But it was almost a deterrent. But I was fixing everything. Fixing, dating. All-nighter, shameful behavior, blah, 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 hangover, pores, sweat, terror, shame. And I lay there and I wanted to kill myself in a way, like, it had crossed my mind before that it was an easy way out. But this was like, I'm like, okay, if I go up to this tower in my building, I can definitely do it, da-da-da-da. And then, and you may call this a God moment, a God wink, whatever. You may not, if you're me. It occurred to me to call a friend of mine who was sober. And I said, let me try that before I walk up the stairs. I mean, that probably wasn't my exact internal monologue, but close to that. I called him, and he said, sit tight. I will come over, and tomorrow I'll give you Antabuse, and we'll try to start this again. I was not ready to come back into AA. I thought I would be judged. I thought I would, be shoved from the rooms, and nobody would welcome me, and everybody would be disdainful. And nobody in my groups at the time was ever like that, but the crazy thinking. So I stayed sober basically on Antabuse and fear. I think that was it for the first 3 months. And then this guy, Jay, talked me slowly but surely into going back into the rooms. He went out, meanwhile, but I got back. And this time I did everything differently in that I did not change who I am at all. At all. I came in with the same aggressive, big personality I'd always had. I came in with my anxiety, and I was just going to be who I was. What I did differently was I got a sponsor who'd read the book, who'd done the steps, and who took me through them one by one. There was no timeline. There was no, you have to do it in 90 days. She did suggest 90 meetings in 90 days. She was not an easy sponsor. She was tough, which was something I needed at the time. Not right for everybody. It is how I sponsor in the beginning. Because mostly they're not going to, or they shouldn't be asking you to do anything too crazy, right? It's like go to a meeting every day, pick up the phone. So I did what she said. I hate taking directions, right? And I think we all can identify with that. I hate it. I hate doing what I'm told. I was never a do what I'm told girl. But I did what I was told. And I wasn't told to do that much. So I went to 90 meetings in 90 days. We did the steps over about a course of a year. I am not into the you have to get it done now. I mean, for me, and what I do when I work with women on the steps and with the big book, is first we contextualize everything, because a lot of language in it is really not great in 2019, especially for women, gay men, really sensitive men. A lot of different people don't find themselves in this book, so we talk about the context of time with this book, and mostly men in 1939 are trying to do the best they can with what they've got. And we pull that context into the steps, and then we look at the steps and work on them in that respect. For me, the steps are the suggestions these men made are incredible for the knowledge they had at the time they had it. These are cognitive behavioral therapy at its simplest. Break it down. I find step 6 and 7, once we've acknowledged, and I don't call them defects, I call them damages. Most of us develop these defects as a way to protect ourselves. This is my experience and how I work with women. This was a way to protect ourselves going through life. So this is how they worked once. They protected us once, they kept us safe once. So now we're just gonna look at them and think like, are they still protecting me? Or is it now taking me out of the stream of life? Is it now preventing me from being a part of real life? We identify those, and then 6 and 7, and Richard was the one who first said this to me, like, they're really important steps. And I was like, meh. And the big book has like a paragraph on them. But this is where the rewiring begins. This is the heart of the cognitive behavioral therapy. Whether you have God or not, either you're asking him to help you see the defense, the damage, stop it in its tracks and change. So you're asking him for that help, but then you have to work to do it. He doesn't just lift it. He helps you see it, and then you do the work. You pray for the hungry, then you feed them, right? So however you look at it, with or without God, this is it. This is where here's the defect coming. What can I do? I can't change my first thought. In fact, none of us can, even to this day. They are automatic, but you can change what happens next. Those steps changed my life. They gave me everything. Now I get to continue to practice them at the end of the steps, which is fantastic. Because by the end of this cognitive behavioral process, it has now become a working part of my mind. It is now second nature, if not nature. But those are the steps, when I look, hindsight makes this so clear, that changed my life. Because for the first time, I could think something, stop, take a minute, and I'll say to people who believe in God, God is in the pause. He's there. You have the thought, give him a minute, right? And then react, then respond. React, don't respond, whatever. But take a minute. So I can see it. I see the negative automatic thought coming. I stop it. Now I have a choice. Just like when you put down alcohol, you're given a choice whether or not you pick it up again. It's the same for every damage, every negative thought. This is hard work, and I think it's a lifelong process. I've mastered none of them. I've gotten really good at some of them. Being nice to Richard is one of them. That's the hardest, is being nice to the people who annoy me the most. Anyway, I get passionate about that because that's the program that worked for me. This rewiring my brain, the way I take information in, and then the way I put it out. AA gave that to me. I'm sure therapists across New York City had said it to me. AA gave it to me in a form I could hear it, right? It doesn't work for everybody. There are 100 million ways, I'm sure, to get sober. This is the one that worked for me. I really hope it works for you. If it doesn't, don't lose hope. There are other ways. But this is you have a lot of different voices saying a lot of different things. And you might just be able to hear it if you stay. Thank you.
Yeah.